in the AWC. If you don't think that they can do it, if you think Method Black will not crumble, will not crack, you can vote in the chat right now with hashtag MB. The gates are now open. Let's see who can take the first game of the day.
This blind pick is interesting from Method Black. I was expecting a Demon Hunter Death Knight, but they obviously are respecting Change My Mind's Wizard Cleave composition. So instead, we're actually getting a Game 1 Wizard War between Change My Mind and Method Black. I'm trying to just take the time to assess who theoretically got the upper hand in terms of these compositions. I would say that Valet's team brings a bit more extra crowd control with that Psychic Horror and Silence combination, but as the Shadow Priest trying to cross midfield against a Frost Mage to secure that crowd control, it is going to be difficult to utilize properly. Deeper into dampening, I do believe that the Elemental Shaman is going to have the upper hand with this Lightning Lasso currently activated on Valet, dealing devastating damage. Good cross crowd control initiation by Method Black as Chaz continues the chain. Now they just need a tad bit more damage to force cooldowns here onto Fried Kitty as they make a swap. And Poike denies the remainder of that damage, having activated Iron Bark. Chaz now silenced. Valet looking to start a crowd control chain, but not in range to really threaten anything further.
Yeah, I don't think this is a bad matchup for Change My Mind at all. I think this is probably one of the compositions they'd like to play against as this. But Valet getting low in the Lightning Lasso once again. You said that is going to be a lot of the burst damage that Swapsy has available. Beautiful Cyclone coming in from Chaz. And they take Valet down right now. Could be an immediate dispersion. Doesn't want to play too greedy. Uses the dispersion, gets topped off from that healing. And Poike going to be playing that balance affinity, the Moonkin form, which makes it much more difficult for Raikou to secure polymorphs. But if they do make a swap on him, and Poike potentially could go down. A nice little attempt on Chaz right now with a bash. And Poike trying to get a little bit aggressive, but they really don't have the damage to force out anything more than just a Bark Skin.
Yeah, I mean, still just taking opportunities to try and go after the healer. I think deeper into dampening is definitely a win condition for either team's composition. The main goal in this matchup is to just max out your damage as much as possible. Sneak in a couple of crowd controls that are not risky, so you will unlikely see these mages casting polymorphs on the Restoration Druids. It is already difficult to polymorph a Druid, but at this level, between the skill that Poike and Chaz have, it's almost impossible. So you will often see the mages instead just focus their priority on Frostbolt in this case, as they're both playing the Frost specialization. Frostbolt then lets them accrue icicles, which appear above their character's head. They can count it up to 5, and then choose to release all 5 icicles with a spell called Ice Lance. They will then combo that with some crowd control. So for the case of Method Black, that's going to be Swapsy's Lightning Lasso. In this case, for Change My Mind, it will be a condition there with the Silence and the Psychic Horror. So Valet will be the initiator. Then we will see Fried Kitty back him up with all those icicles he has spent generating throughout the fight. And then the opposite end, Swapsy will initiate with Lightning Lasso, and Raikou will be the follow-up with the damage.
Yeah, and both of these mages are opting to use most of the Frostbolt Azurite traits, so they're going to be empowering both of their icicles as well as their consistent Frostbolt damage. So looking for as much casted damage as possible, which will add up. Valet getting low in a Lightning Lasso. Could be Dispersion once again. Another beautiful Cyclone from Chaz. Anytime Valet gets low, Chaz is finding these Cyclones that they can burst out of, as long as there's a little bit of crowd control. And Poike, Raikou sneaks into Sheep. Valet in a lot of trouble, activating that Fade. That will make him safe. A nice double fear coming in from Valet. Tremor Totem gets dropped out by Swapsy, and that's one of the utility spells that a Shaman does bring. That Tremor Totem will be able to break himself and his team out of fear if he needs it, and that's basically the counter to what Valet has available. So look for Swapsy to be breaking out Chaz and Raikou from fears if Valet can ever secure them.
The Shadow Priest brings a lot of sustained, consistent damage across multiple members of the team, but it doesn't really bring a huge punch of burst that with paired up against the Elemental Shaman that does basically the exact opposite in terms of damage output from the Shadow Priest. And in the current meta, sustained damage is just not that great, especially facing Restoration Druids who have very powerful heal over time effects that they can spread to their members of their team quite easy and quickly. So instead, I would give the advantage here to Swapsy. Just having that heavy hit during burst windows has been what the teams have relied on to win in the current meta. The Shadow Priest is just a bit lackluster in that regard. Every single Lightning Lasso, every 30 seconds, that's always a threat. Valet's crowd control is just a tad bit longer than that, so they get less attempts, they get less burst. You can already see that that's establishing itself in Poike's mana pool. Poike actually trying to sit down and regenerate some of that to try and edge ahead over Chaz, but overall, there's just been really no pressure for Change My Mind whatsoever compositionally, and Method Black's decision to go into a Wizard War rather than rely on their Demon Hunter Death Knight composition, I think, was a wise move.
Yeah, Raiku's blinking behind the pillar, back to Chaz, taking a little bit of burst damage. Swapsy repositioning on top of Valet, looking for a Lightning Lasso. Immediate interrupt there by Fried Kitty. Nicely done. As we move towards dampening, we can look at the healer's mana. Right now, Chaz has a bit of a lead over Minpoike. Potentially could go look for a drink at some point, but I think with the way these two teams are positioned, it's going to be difficult for either one of these Druids to sit down and get a drink. They're probably going to have to cross the map at some point, but if they do cross the map, their team will lose a lot of pressure, so it's a risky situation indeed.
All right, we do see some initiation here by Change My Mind. Finally, some pressure as Fried Kitty has managed to sneak in a polymorph. You don't usually see these Druids at this level getting caught in that crowd control, and you can see how much pressure is developed if you can find an opening like that. Unfortunately for Change My Mind, not netting them any cooldown, so no real significant lead established from that nice play. Now we see Method Black engaging with crowd control. Minpoike caught into a bash polymorph as Method Black push on top of the enemy team. Valet already in a good position to just avoid the attack entirely, and nothing is going to be banked on either side at this point. It's really mana that is the name of the game before we get into deeper stages of dampening, and currently is fairly even. Actually, Minpoike now getting slightly ahead in that regard, and it's going to be important that he maintains a powerful lead so that when we do get to the upper stages of dampening, and this is one where you may want to start taking your bets because the way that these compositions go head to head, we may be breaking records.
I doubt it. I don't think we're getting 85% set, I'm going to be honest. I think the Shadow Priest brings a little bit too much crowd control, and the consistent damage is high. I am curious to see which one of these teams does get an edge. Like you said, the Shaman focusing on a lot of burst, has utility shutdown, whereas the Shadow Priest has good crowd control. In addition to that, it also has a good amount of consistent pressure. Fried Kitty getting bursted down right now. Chaz mana not doing too great. Minpoike actually maybe got a drink in that situation, regenerated some of his mana, and now Change My Mind does have a lead, but with Chaz sitting in stealth and cat form for this long, I can't help but feel like he went for a drink, but unable to find it. He had to come back, assist Raikou. Psychic Horror now secured by Valet. They're looking to get aggressive onto Raikou, potentially forcing out an Ice Block, but doesn't look like they have the damage to do so just yet.
Currently, we see Chaz very far behind on mana at this point as Minpoike. Is he able to regenerate any off the back of this? We're looking to see. He was able to completely reset his mana, so even though potentially compositionally disadvantaged, Minpoike doing a solid job of making sure that he's got a mana lead over Chaz to try and overcome this disadvantage in game number 1, and that's very significant here at 16% dampening. However, pressure has been almost always in favor of Method Black. Valet is constantly at sub 50% health, really no counter pressure against the opposing team, Method Black. Swapsy looking to move in and close with that Stormkeeper burst. Valet Psychic screaming him away, but still ultimately able to connect. Finally, some damage on Swapsy. Lightning Lasso gets trinketed, so Valet can counter pressure. They sneak in a polymorph. Change My Mind are finding mistakes on the side of Method Black and capitalizing quite effectively to turn this game on its head.
Yeah, Swapsy completely out of mana as well, not able to really heal himself up in this situation. Chaz still caught in crowd control. Nicely done by Minpoike. Swapsy now caught into the Psychic Horror, using Ghost Wolf trying to kite around the pillar, avoid some of the damage. Raikou looking for some counter pressure now onto Valet. Chaz playing catch up with his Innervate, wants to make all of his casted spells free of mana, and he does manage to top off Swapsy. Good use of Innervate there by Chaz, making sure he can get off that those casted heals.
I think Chaz and Swapsy had a bit of a miscommunication there. You normally don't want to Cyclone the Lightning Lasso. It's the biggest damage output of the team. Chaz then tried to switch it to the Mage Fried Kitty and was able to, but they lost out on a bit of damage there. It's definitely a miscommunication, but you can already see Minpoike, even though he got a massive lead earlier on, is now starting to even out with Chaz. It's still anyone's match here at 24% dampening. Raikou trying to pause out the fight, but Swapsy's got a lot of damage lined up here with 2 lightning bolts going straight for Valet. Interrupt now on Shadow, denying any sort of defense. That Void Shift unaccessible in this position. Ray of Frost fully channeled. Lots of damage potentially here to take out Valet. Void Shift still available, but he's trying to hold on to it, instead choosing to line of sight and try and heal himself up with Shadow Mends. Not going to be enough. Huge Earth Shock forces Valet to make a trade on that dispersion. He would have liked to have held that cooldown to use for a push later into the fight, and now he will be vulnerable
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of the Shadow Priest, though. Dispersion and their Fade, that greater Fade talent, is going to be a really low cooldown, but Valet, very vulnerable right now, only really has the Void Shift. Minpoike needs to connect the Iron Bark, manages to do so. Valet still looking for damage, but Swapsy's been doing a really good job in this matchup, making sure he's wind shearing Valet over and over, really limiting the amount of consistent pressure Valet's been able to put out. Silence now on Chaz has changed my mind, looking to get aggressive, but Swapsy and Raikou, they're just sitting at full health. They really just can't find the damage that they need. And Poike trying to escape for a drink once again, but Chaz chasing him down. Even though Chaz is a little bit below on mana, things are looking good for Method Black.
Yeah, Method Black are very solid in this matchup. The only thing really that's going for Change My Mind is Minpoike's drinks and regeneration and mana management. Currently burst towards Valet as well as Raikou. Both teams continue swinging. Maledict attempt here on Raikou to try and force an ice block. Minpoike gets polymorphed. Nice play by Method Black, but Raikou is still low on health, and Chaz doesn't have much mana to recover. He's expending the rest of that mana on a lot of Cyclones. That's going to put him behind, but if they can just net a kill off of it, who really cares? Valet ducking around the corner, avoiding some burst, but still dipping very low. Minpoike trades Iron Bark, starts to stabilize. Chaz now trying to take the opportunity while the enemy team is pinned down to drink, and Minpoike does not want to have that happen. That's the only thing they've got going in their favor was a mana lead. Minpoike denies the drink. Now they stay in the fight. Valet still getting bursted. They're going to have to babysit Chaz and keep their team alive. If Valet tries to cross into center field to deny a drink, he could just explode. So Minpoike has to be the one to deny drinks and heal his team. So far, he's doing a great job bashing up Chaz now, looking to crowd control, but Raikou backs up Chaz with a blink counter spell. Well timed, and that means that Valet could be in trouble. They silence Swapsy to try and prevent any sort of counter pressure during that scary moment. Good mid-game adaptation by Valet. You would typically only use that silence on a healer, but if you are absolutely desperate, you need to mix up your crowd control usage. Still falling behind. Minpoike's having a tough time babysitting Chaz and healing Valet at the same time, and Swapsy and Raikou are trying to capitalize on it.
Yep, that's the added benefit of having most of the pressure go your way. Chaz, once again, can sneak away for a drink, but Minpoike has to stop him. If Chaz can get mana here, it's going to be looking really good for Method Black. That's the only lead Change My Mind has. Chaz is able to regenerate a little bit of mana. Valet still in a little bit of trouble. No Dispersion. He does have the Void Shift if he needs it. Vampiric Embrace as well. He gets hexed up. Swapsy and Raikou are going to be looking for some burst out of that if they can. Valet gets wind sheared once again, just over and over. Swapsy just doing a great job with those interrupts. And Poike finds a bash onto Chaz, but just no counter pressure here for the team of Change My Mind. Raikou and Swapsy have been healthy for so long. Now Valet in a Lightning Lasso, trying to heal himself up with the Vampiric Embrace, trying to sneak away to the pillar. And what was that burst? That was insane.
That's Swapsy.
Oh, man.
That's Swapsy, I guess.
That's a lot of burst. Void Shift still going to be available as well. Zico, how are they able to grab this win? Method Black actually ended this one a little bit quicker than we thought.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to. Swapsy's been doing this time and time again, where he pulls up all of his damage, and then he gets the Lightning Lasso, and then he goes for that big Earth Shock at the very, very end of it. We've seen him do that even at the start of the game when Valet got cycloned on by about 10%. He was at the back of that combo. You can see his Maelstrom is completely stacked up. He goes for a little Hex. Then this is all just to disrupt Valet here, and then he's going to go for the Lasso and a big, big Earth Shock as well. Actually, he's still pooling up as he used some of that Maelstrom just now. And we can see Chaz as well, just being annoying, honestly, just doing what he does with the Cyclones, just shutting down Fred Kitty, and there it is. Big, big damage from Swapsy with that Earth Shock. That was for sure a crit.
Yeah, that's a crit indeed. That is a lot of damage coming in. And that's one of the reasons why we've been talking about all the places that Elemental Shamans do look good as well. And you're even saying sometimes in the place of mages paired up with the Rogue, because of the way that even Rogue Mage is going to function now, Elemental Shamans can kind of fill that role as well. And that's not something that we always see.
Yeah, and I mean, it comes down to utilizing the Elemental Shaman's kit as well, because you can play it in so many different ways. But the strength are, of course, just how disruptive it is in this particular matchup. You have the Hex to interrupt cast with, as we saw towards the end there. Even if it gets dispelled, you still buy yourself a couple of seconds. Then, of course, you have the Grounding Totem, you have the Thunderstorm, you have the Lightning Lasso, you have the Wind Shear, of course, as well. So you have all of these different ways to shut down the enemy. And another big thing with the Ele Shaman as well is, of course, the burst. And in dampening, when you get a big burst like that, it just allows you to keep staying ahead because of that. So Swapsy, the way he positions as well is just phenomenal. He always stays at the opposite pillar where the enemy is, and then he just kind of dips in and out of line of sight, shooting a couple of instants, going back behind the pillar, loading up his Stormkeeper, going out, throwing a few zaps, throwing a wind shear, and then he just keeps doing that. It's very annoying to play with,
Yeah,
knowing from first-hand experience.
It's important to actually watch what he's doing, right? Like, he's storing up so much stuff, so he is able to come in with that burst and just hit you in the face with a meatball and a slap right to the face, right? It's one of those things where you have Stormkeeper, you can sit on that after you've already casted it, then you get to hang out, you hang on to a Lava Burst, a Lava Surge proc, come in with that, and then, like he said, using that Maelstrom for the big Earth Shock.
Yeah, the big Earth Shock partnered with the Lightning Lasso. The Lightning Lasso, that stun, that channeled stun that also reduces your HP. Very powerful talent for the Elemental Shaman. We saw Swapsy utilize it quite well. Gets them low with the Lasso, comes in with Earth Shock. That's how they're able to close out the game. And I don't think Vallejo was really expecting that amount of damage.
I don't think that you really can play expecting that much damage, right? Like, if you do, you make different mistakes. I think Valet was playing with the right play in mind, the high percentage plays in mind, but now Method Black, they can lock this in relatively confidently, because I think Change My Mind was not super upset in that blind pick. I think that this was something that they were aware they could be playing into, and we'll have to see if they do change course here.
I thought the composition Change My Mind had would be a better matchup, but it just seemed with the way Method Black was playing it, Raikou and Swapsy constantly on the pillar, really limiting the amount of damage Valet could do. He was kind of a sitting duck. He was just really susceptible to those wind shears consistently, and it just seemed like Method Black, they had all the cards in their favor in terms of pressure.
I honestly, we could have a desk segment where we talk about nothing but Swapsy. I mean, everything that he did there was right. It's just as simple as that. If you want to play Shaman, watch what Swapsy did. It comes down not only to how we're saying he actually uses his damage, uses the toolkit to be disruptive so that damage actually matters for something, because let's be honest right now, when we see games that are going on this long, a lot of the damage that you do, if you're just doing damage, you can sit there and you can destroy the meter. You can pump the entire time all you want. You can pad. That damage doesn't mean anything. That really does not mean anything if you're not doing what we saw Swapsy do. And then you go a step further. The way that he positions, the way that he uses pillars is it. He's not a human. He's better than us.
Yep. But I mean, it's Swapsy and particularly Zeepai as well. They do this. I think it's kind of brain damage from playing against too much Rogue Mage. Where no, I'm
I said he transcended humanity, and then Zeke goes, "Yeah, he has brain damage."
No, I honestly think it's like they have been scarred from years and years of playing against the best Rogue Mages. So and we are going to see the Shadow Priest Mage locked in. This is like we kind of expected, the best matchup for Change My Mind. They only really have the Rogue Mage and the Shadow Priest Mage. But just to elaborate on what I meant is, Swapsy and Zeepai, they are so used to being able to just get global in one stun lock, 100-0. So they play always ahead of that situation happening. They always try to position themselves, so they're just never going to go in line of sight with the Rogue. And I think I remember last week when I was talking about Snuts Elishaman, how he was crossing the map back and forth, and I said what Swapsy does is he just runs around the same pillar. He just never even lets you get into his line of sight until you just leave him alone. That's how he plays it, and that's how they use his globals as well. He just goes into line, uses the global, and then when he's on global cooldown, he goes behind that pillar again, and then it recharges, he goes back out again, and it just minimizes the amount of damage you're able to do to him, and he's still able to push out pretty much the same amount.
Yeah, I think that you can definitely see some of the upsides to how Snuts positioned, right? Like, when he was crossing the map, a lot of the time he was creating space.
It's more offensive.
Yeah, and a lot of the time he was able to go in and actually get more damage and favorable trades as well. But the thing is when you look at how Swapsy does play it, it does look like it's the high percentage play. Is it the flashiest all the time? No, but it just seems like it is textbook. It is right. And then you look at so many of the players that Swapsy has played with throughout the years, and I feel like I would say the same thing about a lot of them, Supa. You know, you talk about different players like Botar, right? Botar is just a fantastic healer. Does he ever do anything that's like super flashy? No, not at all. It's
he
like
just makes no mistakes.
It's just textbook. It's just like counting to 1, 2, 3, right? It's like, yeah, of course, yeah, you managed to count to 3. Not that hard, but
I'm surprised.
Right.
Change My Mind went with the same composition. I was expecting them to Rogue Mage into the Elemental Shaman Mage We've seen that in the past. Obviously, Elemental Shaman doesn't enjoy fighting Rogue Mage, even though Rogue Mage may not be in the most powerful position right now, but I'm not really a big fan of seeing them do the Frost Mage Shadow Priest again after watching game number 1. They really didn't get anything going, even though they established significant leads in regards to mana, and then they just kind of got deleted by Swapsy, which can happen at any point in the game when facing an Elemental Shaman. The Shadow Priest is not going to crit you for half your health. It just doesn't exist in its toolkit. Shadow Priest is much more constant, slow-paced ramp building. Like, if they can get to 40% dampening and then get that ramp going, it's going to be really hard for Chaz to heal. But if you just get zapped, you don't get to ramp. You're gone.
To be fair, though, to play devil's advocate of it, we don't normally see Elemental Shamans do that, what we just saw. Like, normally you don't see someone go from 30% to 0 instantaneously. I mean, it can happen, but I feel like that is the point in the game where the tide could turn and change my mind's favor, where the Shadow Priest damage over time effects really will start adding up at around 45% dampening. And like we kind of talked about, Minpoike actually did have a mana lead, so they could go into that game. I could see it playing out again where maybe that Earthshock doesn't crit and Change My Mind actually wins that game, so I can't really blame them.
Not to like meme on you right now either, Sid, but this was a conversation that we had last night after the tournament. You were talking about like wanting to see Affliction in a few series. I feel like in this particular situation, the Shadow Priest is achieving everything that you said you wanted to see, but better.
I mean, yeah, in that case, but the Affliction Lock is just also what I was considering was Affliction Lock against Rogue DK.
Why do you love Affliction?
Yeah, only in that specific matchup, because it doesn't. Shadow Priest has to cast. Affliction Lock doesn't have to cast to do instant damage, and it can avoid damage, and it's more tanky than Shadow Priest. That's why I thought Affliction in that matchup would be better than Shadow Priest. You think Demon Armor isn't more tanky than Shadow Priest?
Not in this matchup.
Yeah, not in this matchup, but I said DK Rogue.
But that's why I'm saying in this particular matchup, Shadow Priest is achieving all those boxes that you were trying.
I mean, they're very similar. They're a similar archetype.
I wonder how many of the Warlock pros that watch these games cringe every time you say play Affliction over Destro.
Only in that specific matchup.
I'm just going to switch the conversation here to this actual matchup. And I think Ven brings up a good point in regards to the matchup. So the Shadow Priest Mage in dampening, in like 40 or 50% even dampening, they have the lead because they do more overall damage. Now, before that point though, what Method Black essentially is doing is they're crowd controlling Fried Kitty because they don't have those dots. They don't have those spread damage over time effects, right? They just have an Ellie Shaman. Sure, you have the Flame Shock, but who cares? It's Flame Shock. You just press it again, right? And with the way that Change My Mind has to adapt, in my opinion, is they need to sheep up Raikou and crowd control him more, because what's happening essentially, even in the last replay over the kill, was Fried Kitty gets polymorphed, Fried Kitty gets polymorphed, Fried Kitty gets cycloned, and he's just locked out of the game entirely. And that's not because Fried Kitty is playing the matchup wrong, that's because he is enabling his Shadow Priest to do full damage. If he sheeps Raikou, he will remove those dots that Villet has, so he will basically do less damage. He will force Villet to do less damage. But if he lets Raikou just spam polymorph him, he actually can't get that aggression, and their win condition is latent dampening anyway, so I think just cheap over Villet's dots, remove them, spam control Raikou as well, make sure that Fried Kitty gets to play the game a little bit himself, and that way you will gain that damage loss that you're losing when you remove Villet's dots, essentially, with Fried Kitty just being enabled to play more. So I want to see them do that, and then later in dampening, then he can allow Villet to just dot up everything and just try to blink out of line of sight from that crowd control that Raikou is throwing at him. So he just needs to adapt his game plan a little bit, I think, in this matchup, because before dampening, Villet's damage is not going to matter more than Fried Kitty's for sure.
Control and damage, two factors that they're going to need to balance here. Method Black, 84% of you think that they're going to be able to take it. 240 points before they even made it to this tournament, and a strong opener on the way.
We see Minpoike playing Feral Affinity at the start of the fight, and that's actually something in the Wizard Cleave mirror that I think the Restoration Druids should consider, because the damage is often so slow outside of very specific windows of burst that during that lull damage point, you can jump in and add extra damage to your team and maybe potentially force a cooldown, or at least force the other team to expend more mana. And I do think Feral Affinity is something that Restoration Druids should be experimenting more with after seeing the success that Gareki has really seen with it. We currently see Minpoike Poike utilizing it quite effectively here on Raikou. He's been tearing into him, even as the healer, just adding a bit of extra damage, pulling Iron Bark from Chaz and creating a lot more pressure, at least for his team.
Yeah, and early on in the game, I mean, although Raikou didn't go down, that damage a little bit later on will be significant onto Raikou, to potentially take him down. Raikou used his Icy Veins. He's getting polymorphed up, and this is what we wanted to see from Fried Kitty, the freedom to actually get these polymorphs onto Raikou, slow down some of that Frost Mage damage, and potentially that could be favorable for Change My Mind moving forward.
Right, both druids are running Feral Affinity. Chaz using that Rake Stun into a Cyclone of Minpoike. I think Minpoike is utilizing it a bit better so far in this match. Chaz seems a little more hesitant to try and get in there and get his paws wet. Actually, no, I swear I saw a Rake Stun, but he's in Boomkin form. I swear I did. I swear I did. I swear I saw Minpoike.
We'll check the VOD.
I swear I saw Minpoike in that.
All right, well, maybe the stun got reflected even though it's not possible.
Maybe I'm looking at the wrong druid frame. There's a lot of druids, okay? There's a lot of trees in the forest. They all start looking the same. Yeah,
there's a nice fear coming in from Valet. Good crowd control. Raikou getting a little bit low. Kitty getting bursted down as well. You see it too?
Yeah, no, I see it. Look at Minpoike, he's in cat form right now.
No, Minpoike has it. I thought I saw Chaz have it when he jumped over, but I'm obviously mixing up the druids here. Minpoike getting bursted, and that is going to be one of the drawbacks of Feral Affinity, is that when you run out in cat form, you're very squishy. You're completely a viable option to attack and take down. So Minpoike needs to juggle both saving his team, healing them up, jumping in, pushing forward, getting aggressive, dealing damage, and then while still avoiding death himself. If he can accomplish all three of these at the same time, then he can definitely carry the team with that affinity. Seems like he wants to jump in over on the side tombstones, but Valet just taking a huge hit as he tried to push forward into Method Black territory.
Yeah, Chaz taking the opportunity there while Raikou was controlling the entire game. He had a polymorph on Valet, interrupt on Fried Kitty. Chaz was able to sneak away and drink to full, resetting his mana, actually giving Method Black the mana lead, and I think that's really good control from Method Black, realizing in the last game they did fall behind on mana, so try to not fall behind early on is definitely an intelligent play. Cyclone now on Minpoike. Fried Kitty again bursting down. He trinkets out of the Lightning Lasso, trying to avoid some of that damage from Swapsy. Looking to line of sight as well. Needs to stay in LOS, or line of sight of Minpoike. Is managing to do so, and I think Minpoike will be able to stabilize here, but still, the mana lead for Method Black is significant.
Yeah, I mean, they've just gotten great crowd control in that entire exchange, and now Fried Kitty's health is paused at low. They're looking to try and rotate crowd control back over to Minpoike and force an ice block potentially, but they're just not able to find it. Minpoike line of sighting. Fried Kitty's still in midfield. I guess with Iron Bark, he's got more than enough defense to stay stable, but now with Lightning Lasso followed by Swapsy, can they get an ice block here? Doesn't look like they have enough damage to do so. Fried Kitty trying to launch an attack back at Raikou, almost a bit randomly, or it's just unfortunate. Valet got polymorphed right when they went for that. You typically see the Gladiator's Maledict coordinated with the team, so one player will launch it first, bait the healer to dispel its healing absorption effect, and then the other two players will follow up with their Gladiator's Maledicts. In that position, Fried Kitty launched his, but his partner, Valet, was crowd controlled and unable to, so then they become uncoordinated, and it's much less threatening when it's only one to deal. What is happening in this series? Remember it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, remember in the last game, very often. In the last game I said, you know, Swapsy's burst, it doesn't happen really often. You couldn't have predicted that. Like, we're gonna look at the replay of that game. Fried Kitty got exploded just like Valet did in the last game.
Doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't.
I looked away from the screen. I was texting my mom. I was like, Mom, no, this is gonna go a little bit later into dampening. Don't worry. Just take a second, listen to the guys, learn a little bit more about what we can expect to see. Blown up, no ice block getting used. What happened?
Well, a couple of things happened. First of all, Swapsy happened. It's kind of the obvious one. Same thing as in the previous game, of course. But the other thing is, Fried Kitty wasn't playing Temporal Shield in this game. So in the first game, Fried Kitty was playing Temporal Shield, and he was playing Kleptomania, and he was playing Deep Shatter, which makes his Frostbolt essentially do more damage to frozen targets. This game, though, you can see Fried Kitty doesn't play that Temporal Shield. He's playing the same build as Raikou. Now, the difference is Raikou's playing with an Ellie Shaman, and I actually like the no Temporal Shield play, but you have to be a little bit more safe when you play it. You can see Swapsy knocks Fried Kitty out. He shears him there, and then here comes the Maledict combo. I believe there was a Lightning Lasso involved in this. Yep, there it is. So look at Swapsy's mana bar or Maelstrom bar. Sorry, Lightning Lasso, boom, Earthshock. Every single time they go for these kills, that's what he does. He pulls up his Maelstrom to over 100, which makes his Earth Shock do even more damage than it already does. Then he combos it with the lasso, and at the very, very end of it, the target is still stunned for like a microsecond. He gets that Earth Shock. It's a hit scan ability, so there's no travel time. It's not like a Frostbolt where you shoot a little bolt that travels and then does damage. It's an instant hitting ability, so just one-shots him.
Okay.
Also, you can use the Maledict trinket while you're channeling the lasso.
I'm going to go.
Just comboing all of his stuff perfectly.
I'm going to go back to what Venruki did say, though. I think this one is even more in the bucket that you did mention. That's not something that we expect to happen very often at all. Getting through a lot of defensive cooldowns without it being used. The Maledict also going out is going to add into the amount of damage that the Elemental Shaman can do. I don't think we expected the series to necessarily go this way, but it's looking like Method Black might be able to close this one out very quickly when we return. Swapsy has already wrangled 2 wins, but it looks like the third one is not one that he is going to be able to lasso in. Method Black going to be able to bring the cleave here on this small map that Change My Mind brought to try to change the tide of this series. Will it be enough, or is this cleave that we've already seen been so strong going to be able to tear through these 2 casters like their absolute paver? One thing that we do know is as soon as these gates do open, it is going to be outstanding.
Definitely. Method Black, this is the composition we thought they would bring in game number 1. It has been what they've been defaulting to. Besides that Mage Ellie, those two compositions is what we've seen them be the strongest on so far. And I like this adaptation. On the smaller map, it's going to be difficult for Change My Mind to escape from Raikou with those mana rifts already starting off on Minpoike. Good life grip there. Leap of faith by Valet to secure Minpoike away from that mana rift from Raikou, securing his mana for a little bit longer. We're going to have to look for him to consistently do that whenever it's off cooldown, just to buy Minpoike's mana as much time as possible.
All right, Change My Mind going for Hook Point, a small map, and Method Black say thank you and lock in that Demon Hunter Death Knight composition. And the reason that it is so potent is that as a Restoration Druid, you typically are required to drink to regenerate your mana for a late game play, and on this map, you're not drinking. It's not happening, not on Hook Point. It's too small, it's too narrow. People can get across the map too easily. So Raikou is likely running that Mana Rift ability, the Honor talent, so he can then burn down the mana of Chaz, build a huge lead there. Sorry, burn down the mana of Minpoike and build a huge lead there. And then due to the map that Change My Mind have locked in, he's never going to be able to sneak away, drink, and regenerate mana. And Method Black can just take a clean 3-0 here against Change My Mind. Unless they can change my mind with some amount of damage that I've not seen them yet capable of, Method Black are looking strong.
And I just want to say how impressive this is from Method Black. It's very rare. I don't know if we've ever seen it, where two caster players will switch over and play 2 melee on such a high level, and that is really what makes Method Black such a dangerous team. Raikou is getting low. This is a nice setup from Change My Mind. Ironbark was committed, but Raikou still with the blur, as well as Darkness. Should be able to survive, top himself off now that he's in Metamorphosis, that demon form. It's a lot of leech healing, so when you see him in that demon form, whenever he's attacking, he is going to be healing himself up a significant portion of his health. And that's what makes this comp so strong. You have the Death Knight, who has a lot of self-healing, as well as the Demon Hunter, which basically means Chaz doesn't have to use as much mana, and his team is overall just exceptionally durable.
You'll often see Minpoike just use his Gladiator's Medallion to remove stuns from Raikou, and this is so that he can dodge the Mana Rift. Earlier on in the last stun, Valet used Life Grip to be able to pull Minpoike away from the stun Mana Rift combination and avoid its mana draining effect. If they can coordinate these two spells together, they can drag on the fight to potentially open up opportunities to kill a target later into dampening, and dampening is pretty much required when facing this Demon Hunter Death Knight Restoration Druid combination. Restoration Druid, just the king of the healers, definitely on top. Its only weakness right now is that it does need to drink frequently, which you can capitalize with small maps, but in general it is the best healer overall. Demon Hunters bring in consistently insanely high self-healing mechanics, as already explained through Leech. As you can see, Raikou uses Eye Beam. It activates this Metamorphosis ability where he grows wings, he becomes gigantic, and every attack he does heals him for a significant amount. Then of course we have Death Knight here for Swapsy. He brings in Death Strike, which heals him for a significant amount of his own health. So you pair this individual self-healing capabilities along with the most powerful healer in the game, and you've got a recipe that's going to take it into really deep dampening. So Change My Mind have to survive and maintain their mana until that point, so they can reduce the effectiveness of this leech healing from Raikou and Death Strike of Swapsy. There may be potential in dampening, but then even at that point, there are very powerful team defensive cooldowns for the composition that Method Black have as well, that being Darkness from Raikou. So at any point, Raikou can place a purple cloud on the ground, which will have a chance to immune basically all incoming damage. There's about a 30% chance that something will hit him, but it's very unlikely. Although those Earth Shocks earlier in the game, maybe there is a chance that it could happen. This is also one of the powerful team defensive cooldowns currently activated with that purple shield that is Swapsy's anti-magic zone. So during those critical burst moments, they will almost always have an available cooldown trade to negate a kill from the composition that Change My Mind have brought here, which is why they are so heavily favored compositionally, so heavily favored on the map. Change My Mind need a miracle.
Yeah, and Swapsy really playing to that advantage. He's actually playing the PvP talent Transfusion, so every 45 seconds he can reduce the cost of his Death Strike by 50% for 7 seconds. So that gives him a lot of self-healing every 45 seconds that he can use to top himself off. He's going to be dropping that Raise Abomination we often see Death Knights play, but he realizes his win condition is just to survive as long as possible, limit the amount of damage that Fried Kitty and Valet can really do, not die, and eventually Minpoike will go due to the mana rifts of Raikou. On this map, it's just so hard to avoid, and Method Black, similar to how we saw Method Orange, is implementing this strategy quite beautifully. I mean, it's difficult for Change My Mind. They're a very high caliber team, especially on this Shadow Priest Mage comp, but Fried Kitty with Swapsy just sitting on him the whole game, his damage is so limited. He's just getting interrupted, Mind Freeze, it gets interrupted by the Ghoul over and over and over, and he's not able to consistently drop out the Blizzard and get the Frostbolts he needs to do significant damage.
I will say Minpoike and Valet have been doing a good job of dodging as many mana rifts as physically possible, so they at least have some opportunity here as dampening has just begun. But as you can already see, Minpoike tried to sneak away and get a drink. This map is too small for him to do so. I do not like that they picked Hook Point. If they were really having to rely on this composition, it was just not a wise move, at least if they wanted to have more games on the board potentially to throw the series back. Maybe they're just saying, well, if we can't win on this map, we can't win anyway because we're going to have to play on 2 small maps even if we win this next game, but I'm not sold on that 100%. Icy Veins currently activated, so this is typically where you will see a trade from Raikou with Darkness as it lines up so efficiently with Icy Veins and potentially needed. Raikou gets mind controlled at low health. Iron Bark before dampening is likely to be enough damage reduction for Raikou to safely stabilize throughout this pressure. Now getting back on target, Eye Beam, so now all of his attacks start healing him. You can see his health going up quite rapidly as a result. Valet getting pressured down. Valet also brings in a little bit of self-healing, but I wouldn't say it's as potent, at least not against single target pressure as Raikou's or Swapsy's is. There's another Mana Rift timed there with the Ursul's Vortex. I'm not sure if it was actually entirely able to connect onto Minpoike as he's jumping in to get crowd control for the team. Finally, Change My Mind are starting to initiate some crowd control and trying to find some burst opportunities. Just before we get to something like 30% dampening is when you want to be getting Raikou's Darkness, so that when we're at 40 or 50 or 60% dampening, he doesn't have it, and then you can actually find a kill. But if Raikou can hold on to Darkness until that 50-60% dampening, he can use that to immune a kill and then run down the enemy team. We already see pressure establishing itself across all 3 members of Change My Mind.
Yeah, and this is looking like a tag team tournament. Anytime Raikou's getting targeted down, caught in Novas, and has to play a little bit defensive, you immediately see Swapsy run over to Minpoike and say, well, if Raikou can't sit on you, I certainly will. That will keep Minpoike's mana at a critical level. Minpoike on 50% right now, still has his Innervate active, so he might be able to top off Fried Kitty. In terms of defensive cooldowns, Change My Mind is still doing quite well, but often what we see from a composition like Method Black, when you go up against them, things are stable, you have all your defensives, and then your healer goes out of mana, and then things just start spiraling out of control. You'll see Dispersion, Void Shift, both ice blocks pulled out rapidly, especially as we move towards the 30-40% dampening. The Method Black can keep up the pressure and just stop Minpoike from drinking at basically all costs.
Pressure on Fried Kitty here by Method Black as dampening ramps up. Damage becomes more valuable than healing. Minpoike actually did manage to sneak away. How much mana did he ultimately get? I mean, it's better than nothing, especially on this map. He's actually got a lead over Chaz, and Minpoike has been doing everything he can for his team, but the compositions that they've brought in the current meta are just not enough to take down the compositions that these types of calibers of teams have brought in, such as Method Black and as we saw earlier in the tournament. So I'm not sure if they've got what it takes to go all the way, but they're trying to do everything in their power to make it happen. Can they do it battling against the meta? Another important thing to take note is that these players are playing on a tournament server, which means they have access to the highest item level gear in the game, basically the best gear in the game. And when you have high item level Azerite gear, you actually have 20%, I believe, more maximum health than in any other patch of this expansion. So these teams just have huge health pools, which then makes percentage-based damage even more valuable. Currently a big attack here on Raikou. This is where they would have liked to be getting the Darkness, but at least they get the anti-magic zone at that 20 to 30% mark. If they can keep pressure up and get Darkness here as well, it's definitely going to be critical if Change My Mind are going to be able to take this game. They're not finding enough damage to do so. Valet now on the back foot, and Minpoike trying to stabilize. Change My Mind doing a phenomenal job, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to overcome this disadvantage.
We'll definitely have to see. So far, they have been making it work. There's been signs of life on Raikou. Chaz with no Trinket, no Iron Bark. Raikou as well, no Blur, so that's his main defensive cooldown he has available. Valet and Fried Kitty can get another nice setup here with crowd control on Chaz. Raikou could certainly have to pull up the potential Darkness in this next exchange, but Raikou's going to be moving over onto Minpoike once again. You can see his mana is just taxed so much. Chaz sitting in cat form, trying to potentially get out of combat, forcing Fried Kitty and Valet to be distracted in the matchup. But I really am impressed with how Change My Mind is playing this. Minpoike has been able to hold on to that mana for so long.
Yeah, his coordination with Valet has been critical here on hook point. And if they can take the worst map for them out of the pool, maybe they do stand a chance to come back in the series, but they need to get that darkness from Raikou. And if they can't get it within the next 10% of dampening, I think they are going to be overwhelmed with pressure. So, and that number gets to 40%, they need to have gotten through it. Can they do it? They do have a significant mana lead, actually, which is quite surprising. And I mean, Chaz has the same disadvantage on hook point. He actually can't really drink either. Valet gets crowd control onto Chaz. Raikou reverse magics it, but now potential opening for Polymorph. If Fried Kitty can sneak in one, he gets it. Good opportunity for Change My Mind to try and force a darkness. They need damage. It's just not there. Raikou is just so easily deflecting it with Blur activated. Basically, Chaz and Raikou can make trades with Iron Bark and Blur, as they are basically the same cooldown, and you just rotate them one after the other. And then if one of those isn't available, you then look to use a team cooldown, so something like Darkness or Anti-Magic Zone. And because Method Black's defensive rotation has been on point, no real big overlaps there, and the potency of their self-healing, Change My Mind, just aren't finding that opening that they need. They got maybe another 5% of dampening to get darkness from Raikou, but they're getting overwhelmed already with Fried Kitty down at around 20%. And Poike's mana still looks somewhat serviceable here in game number 3 as they're on match point. They have to win this or they're out of the tournament.
Yeah, Change My Mind getting lower, all 3 members. How's been Poike gonna deal with it? But big burst on Raikou. Anti-Magic Zone does get dropped out. Can Raikou survive? Chaz doesn't have much mana left to work with. Might have to drop out the darkness, but Raikou manages to stabilize. Fried Kitty still low, as well as Valet. Now Poike in a bash. First ice block gets forced out, and this is the moment I'm talking about in the game. At 30-40% dampening, this is when we're going to start seeing every single defensive cooldown from Change My Mind forced out if Method Black can continue the pressure.
Yeah, and at this point, they're really not looking too good. Raikou has his Blur rotated back up, Iron Bark for Chaz, and Darkness. So 3 options that Change My Mind have to try and push through. Maybe with one big push, they can get all 3, but if they can't do it like that, I'm not sure. Icy Veins popped. Raikou just trades Blur. Efficient trade there on his part to stay aggressive and try and just close this game out, as both Druids are completely tapped on mana. But of course, the damage of Method Black is going to be more significant because the Demon Hunter and Death Knight heal themselves, whereas the Mage doesn't heal himself, and the Shadow Priest does, but not nearly as effective. Raikou imprisoning up Fried Kitty so that Swapsy can make his way and reconnect, potentially, and Death Gripping Valet over. That seemed like a miscommunication. I think Swapsy wanted to set up Raikou for a double stun, but then they ended up splitting out with Raikou going after Minpoike. Mana Rift secures the remainder of Minpoike's mana, and at this point, what can you really do as Change Your Mind? Maybe you can go after the Death Knight, try and crowd control Raikou to deny his darkness onto him. There is some option there, but the momentum is just swinging out of control here. Fried Kitty gets interrupted. Ooh, Void Shift is traded by Valet to stay alive, as he could not access Ice Block while interrupted, but now Valet is low on health. He has to trade Dispersion. Minpoike is getting overwhelmed. There's no counter aggression. It's been a completely one-sided match, and Change My Mind, I think, are out of opportunities.
Yeah, this is difficult. Method Black, they're here to win, going to be looking to march through the lower bracket and get into that grand finals to secure their 3rd cup in a row. Change My Mind holding on by a thread, trying to stay in it, but it's just looking so grim. And Poike with the Innervate, trying to get some heals out. Valet still low. Fried Kitty as well. He has an Ice Block left, but he gets interrupted. And now at this point, Raikou's sitting on Fried Kitty. Swapsy's sitting on Valet. Minpoike, this is a nightmare situation. Chaz secures a full Cyclone into a bash on the Trinket. But still, Change My Mind, they are holding on. I just don't see how they can recover, Sid.
Ice Block forced again. Burst on Raikou. They have to kill him in this bash. They don't have enough damage to do it. Anti-Magic Zone, once again from Swapsy, protects Raikou, but it limits his mobility. He actually can't move from it without losing its damage reduction, so at least they can slow down some damage. I don't think it matters. There's no defense left. Method Black play it out clinically, precisely. No mistakes made here. Minpoike is doing everything in his power to try and keep his team alive in this tournament. Valet's Vampiric Embrace. This is a cooldown that allows his damage to heal the team. Maybe that's enough to keep them at least alive, but there's still just no counter pressure whatsoever. They can't find any openings, and Swapsy is looking to close. He gets 2 big zaps in game 1 and 2, switches over to the Death Knight and basically strangles Change My Mind to death here on match point. Method Black advanced 3-0.
And this may just be the easiest tournament of Waz's life, because you look at these 2 comps that Method Black has, and it just looks like they should be able to win the tournament with these 2 compositions. Like, the second that you go to a small map, it's like, okay, one of our best comps right now is going to thrive here. We just go to a melee cleave. And then those same 2 players are able to play with that Ellie and that Mage. And it really is incredible, because we used to talk about the synergy of Raikou and Waz, or sorry, of Raikou not necessarily being there with Swapsy to the same level as it was with Waz being the cornerstone of this team, and now Method Black proving it's like, nope, no matter what the meta is, we have everybody with the same amount of synergy.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to as well. They just have all the right classes. They have, you know, Waz, of course, on that main, on his Rogue as the playmaker. They have the Rogue Mage in their back pocket if it ever comes back to the meta. But now as well, Rogue Ellie Shaman seems to be good in this meta. So maybe that's what they're going to be practicing for the next week. And then all of a sudden they have the Rogue Ellie, they have the DK Windwalker, the DK Demon Hunter, and they have the double Wizard as well with that Ellie Mage. So they definitely have everything going for them. It's a scary team for sure, and that's why they're winning so many of these cups and making so many of these finals.
That comp's kind of the question mark, and I like the fact that we haven't necessarily seen it from them yet. I feel like they're not a team to lock in a comp until they know that they're great at it. I even think back to when Outlaw first started to be a thing that they played. By the time they played it, it was a completely different take than the other iterations that we had seen, the early iterations. But now, taking a look at our bracket, we are going to see the fact that simply